In the English, we have Moses addressing the people. And starting in verse 4, right? Moses then writes down all of the commandments of God. And early in the morning, he sets up an altar at the foot of the mountain, Mount Sinai, with 12 pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Right? And he designates some assistants among the Israelites, and they offer burnt offerings and sacrifice bulls as offerings and of well-being to God. Then Moses takes one part of the blood he dashed against the altar previously. Then he takes the record of the covenant. This whole section, by the way, is known as the Book of the Covenant. It's all centered on Moses receiving the tablets, the covenant, and then disseminating them to the people, and the people accepting the covenant. So it became known over time as the Book of the Covenant. So he takes the Book of the Covenant now and he reads it aloud to all the people. He reads it out loud. And their response is short and seemingly simple, but it has drawn more attention than any other phrase in this portion, and as much attention, probably as much as almost any phrase in the entire Torah. And they say, in Hebrew first, Vayomru kol asher diber Adonai na'aseh v'nishma. They said, all that God has spoken, we will faithfully do. Right? Now that's an interesting translation. Okay? I don't really care for it very much, because literally they say, right? We will, all that God has spoken to us, we will do, and then we will hear or listen. And the commentaries and the questions over those two, that one little juxtaposed phrase, are still going on to this very day, right? Because on the surface of it, first of all, v'nishma can mean several things. It can mean to hear. It can also imply to listen, and also imply to understand, right? So the juxtaposition is poses a question. They respond to all of this, the whole offering of the covenant, and they will say, we will do, and then we will understand. Now, that does seem odd, right? Without questioning, without even considering the ramifications, their responsibilities, their response is one of immediate, total faith. Yes, we will do it. And in our doing these things, and what are these things? It's performing the mitzvot, right? Performing ritual commandments and performing all of the commandments. In our doing of those things, we will then, after the fact, understand the meaning and the purpose of the rituals. And the conflict there is really fascinating, because if we think of how we live, how we behave, we rational, 21st century beings, when we're confronted with a situation, a question, something we need to decide for ourselves, we consider it thoroughly before we make a decision, right? On the surface of it, it seems the people have just a knee-jerk response. Whatever you say, we're going to do it. And then at some point, we'll understand, right? And the commentaries are fascinating about it. So here's one. Interesting. My favorite contemporary translator of the entire Hebrew Bible is a man by the name of Robert Alter. Alter. He's been professor of Middle Eastern languages at Berkeley for many, many years. And his translations now of the entire Hebrew Bible have garnered just, all kinds of amazing accolades from every scholar, from every faith around the world. And he translates not as we will do and we will either hear or listen. He translates it as we will do and we will heed. Heed, we will heed, which offers a new dimension to that. In that one word, and it's a great example of why he's such an incredible translator, because the word heed includes really, we're going to hear it, we're going to listen, and that implies not just physical act of listening or hearing, but it implies we're going to think about it, and then we're going to accept it and do something about it, right? And that's I think an illuminating translation, right? So even in the hearing of it, there is a process of discernment, and then they can act on it. Right? So here's a fascinating commentary from one of the great Hasidic sages. His name was Menachem Mendel of Kosk, and he became known as the Kotzker Rebbe. Right? A little bit about him. He lived from 1787 to 1859. Okay. And he was a relatively unknown figure in Western civilization, but he's often compared to the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. And they lived, of course, worlds apart, but they lived around the same time. Kierkegaard, Kotzker lived in Poland and Kierkegaard in Copenhagen, Denmark, right? They never met. But by the time Kierkegaard published his first book, which was called Either/Or, Either or, in 1843, the Kotzker Rebbe had already removed himself from the world, lived in virtual isolation. Perhaps he had a psychotic break. They're not sure. But while their ways of life were completely different, their theological concerns express a very similar idea. They both searched for a way to determine how one lives one's life in accordance with a personal religious creed and commitment, right? And neither gave their students any answers, only a limitless challenge. For the Kotzker, the one who thinks he is finished is indeed finished. So their struggle urges us to go on in our struggle, that you're never finished. You never arrive there, right? So here's what the Kotzker had to say about this particular passage, right? So Menachem Mendel says, there are so many wise men and scholars and philosophers in the world, all of them pondering, investigating, and delving into the mystery of God. Why do they misuse their wisdom? They only misuse it because they are limited by their intellectual level and perceptual capacity. But the people of Israel are a holy people. They possess special instruments that elevate their perceptual capacity and enable them to transcend the level of their intellect and attain the level of the ministering angels, right? And these are their instruments. It's one simple thing for Menachem Mendel: the performance of the commandments, performance of the mitzvot. This is just what Israel said when they stood at Mount Sinai. We will do and we will hear. through the power of the mitzvot we perform, we are all able to understand, right? And he asks the question that we're asking today. How can we do something before we hear it or understand it, right? And he says, this is the Jewish way of life. He answers his own question by stating that by doing mitzvot, by doing these acts, right, we will hear, which he means to understand God and the divine mystery of the world, right? Here, the Kosker ritualizes all behavior so that everything we do is connected in some way to God. And through the process of doing God's mitzvot, that's how we come to understand God, right? It is through the doing that we come to understand its meaning and its purpose, right? And this is something he goes on to teach every individual has to do for themselves. So it's fascinating to me, this philosophy that in order to come closer to God, to understand, we must actually do something. In this case, it's a physical thing. Even the act of prayer, you have to say the Shema, 3 times daily, whatever it is, it requires a physical act, not just an intellectual act or a mental act. Because even prayer, according to, halakha, you have to utter prayers out loud in the presence of others, right? So in a moment, I'm going to open up the gallery as it is, so we can, share some of our thoughts about this. There is this wonderful tension, really, for I would say contemporary thinkers about this very notion, right? It flies in the face of, for instance, the Buddhist idea, right? That you are what you think. And the Kotzker says, no, you are not what you think. You are what you do. You can think whatever you want, and that's wonderful, insofar as what you think will get you to do something, right? But without the action, you're nowhere, right? So what do we think about Na'aseh v'nishma and the Kotzker Rebbe's interpretation of it, and what any one of us thinks about it? I'll open the floor.
Rabbi, or Cantor, excuse
Yes.
me. I guess you're
I'm
acting.
insulted. It's
You're
okay.
acting. You're acting as a rabbi.
I'll teach. Anybody who teaches is a rabbi. It's fine. Go ahead.
What this evokes for me is the age-old discussion over which is more important, the active life or the contemplative life.
Yeah, right.
And what our religion has always come down with is prioritizing the active life.
This is true.
And it is in the process of acting that we gain understanding. It's not that the understanding follows the acting, it's in the process of acting that we get that understanding. And how many of us, that's how we I know that's how I operate in my business activities. It's in the process of doing that I get the understanding. So it makes eminent sense for me. And I think our religion is wonderful in the sense that the way it gives value to action.
I couldn't agree with you more. In this way, it's it's beautifully sensible. It understands the human being, right? Yeah. Penina.
To support your explaining and interpreting it, it's amazing. The words in Hebrew "Naaseh v'nishma" are also written or could be read in past tense. So that supports your idea right now, or explanation, that yes, they wanted to try it out first before they actually decided to follow.
Right.
Naaseh v'nishma could be present. It also could be past tense. That's it.
So, but that's fascinating, right?
Yeah, wanted to be I would say experienced first.
Yeah, I think where the moment of understanding happens is really up for discussion and debate. We know it happens in that process, as you mentioned, right? In the process, but we're not always certain when that moment happens, right? And one of the many reasons I love Robert Alter's work so much is because he approaches the Hebrew Bible as literature. And his analyses really get into the tense, the intention of the word, how it was used during a certain time period, right? And that can profoundly affect how we think about these things, right? In our clergy meeting yesterday, once a month, one of the clergy brings a little topic to teach, right? And yesterday, Rabbi Nanis brought in this phrase from the Proverbs, which says, "Aseh lecha rav, ukne chaver," right? And we talked about it. What it means is "Aseh lecha rav" is a commandment form. Find yourself a teacher, and you will acquire a friend. And we debated for about 20 minutes what we thought the meaning was. Some of us felt that those two go together. If you find yourself a teacher, you will also be finding a friend, yes. Right? Others felt, no, those are separate notions. First is tzivui, it's in the command tense. You must find a teacher. And you must also separately find a friend. And the implication is to find a friend with whom to study. Right? And it made sense because, look, in those days, the teachers were not friends. Right? We probably all think of that too. I mean, in our childhood, we didn't become friends with our teachers. Right? This is a contemporary notion, right? So both interpretations make good sense. It could read as find a teacher, and in finding a teacher, you will find a friend, right? Right? Or you must have both. Find a teacher, then find a friend with whom to study. Right? So the tense of the verbs, the intonation, the subtle usage of a certain word in a certain time period, all that comes into play when our scholars are interpreting biblical texts, right? So, Naaseh v'nishma, you can know that the sages are still debating it to this very day, right? And that is, some would argue, the very purpose of being a Jew, right? There's a wonderful text from the Talmud, I think it's Mishnah Brachot, where they outline, these are the things that a Jew must do without limitation, right? And it's a litany of things, right? Visit the sick, help the poor, on and on. But it ends with this phrase. The Talmud Torah, but the study of Torah, keneged kulam, is equal to them all, or even surpasses them all. Because where do you learn? Where are you taught to do all those things? But in the Torah. So it's a similar idea, isn't it? Or the reverse. You must learn and understand first, and then you will go out and do, right? So Judaism, in two breaths that we've taken today from this Torah portion on 70 Shema, and the Talmud Torah keneged kulam, right, are seemingly at odds with one another, perhaps with the same result in terms of, the order of these things, right? Because you have to be taught, human beings have to be taught morality. It's not something we're just born with, right? Anyone else? Yes.
Me?
Yes, Eric.
Oh, hi. Okay. I'm reading through this, and I can understand if I buy a Hebrew slave that I can only keep him in slavery for 6 years, and
right.
then I have to let him released. But then it says that if I sell my daughter as a maidservant,
yes,
she will stay in bondage indefinitely. So,
right.
What do I tell her about that when I sell her?
Oh boy. I claim no authority. I claim no.
The circumstances that these record are so strange and so different. Well, I guess different would be the word. I mean, they're almost alien, but we're still trying to pull from those ethics that we can use in today. And so I just say that that's a sort of difficult and complicated process.
It is indeed, and I thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention, because I think it goes to a fundamental conundrum for all those who study, the Hebrew Bible, really almost any sacred text, whether it's the Quran or the Christian Bible. Obviously, for us, how do we come to terms with these things? Because we know that the word Torah, literally means the teaching, right? It doesn't mean, eternal truth or a book of facts or history or any of that. But for those of us who encounter these texts, it would be kind of just foolish of us to read these texts and not be like, what the hell is this? What am I supposed to glean from this? Does a passage like this have as much to teach me? Does it have anything to offer to me in the way of learning that other passages, which are much more powerful in their eternal applications to life, right? Because the Torah is supposed to be teaching us something, and does so primarily through story, right? So what do we do when we encounter, especially when it comes to, laws, right? These are presented as mitzvot, commandments that we must all obey, right? And I think our own human history has shown us the way. For most Jews, like you, in this case, you've studied it, and it can be of interest just in the process of studying, it says this, but there are some that we take to heart that illuminate things for us. In this case, for me, I look at it and I say, well, this was written 2,500 years ago. That type of behavior and societal structure contained those elements. Those things did happen, right? So there was slavery of a variety of types. In this case, you're giving your daughter, to someone so she can be employed, really. A lot of the terminology is just anathema to us, because for those of us to think of the word, slavery, right? I mean, we just can't get past that notion, right? So for me, I first have to wrestle with and understand and accept that this was long ago and far away, which the first step is to not just judge it right off the bat. At the end of the day, we're going to decide what we decide, right? But I think it's helpful to avoid, judging our own texts of the Torah with a contemporary lens, right? We can still find it, that society in those days did these things, and how barbaric, how morally unacceptable. And that's legitimate as well. But I think our lens has to provide almost kind of a detached understanding of these things, right? But it is troubling, and it makes encountering a significant part of the Torah, the entire book of Vayikra and all the sacrificial cult and everything. Sometimes we have to go a long way in metaphor, right, to find a contemporary meaning, right? Penina?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
David is the one who actually established the 7 cities that you can run to, Arei Miklat, in case that when you did something and you think you don't deserve to be whatever.
The five city
cities.
of refuge.
Thank you.
Hamish.
Okay. Right. Thank you. So he's the one who actually established them, according to historians. But because he felt that the blood vengeance, that it's being done till today.
Yes.
Still shouldn't be actually, how would I say, executed the way that he thought should be maybe reconsidered. Okay. So he did it because this particular custom threatened the existence of a whole society or nation, when people just killed each other because of blood vengeance. And yet today in Israel, in one of the Palestinian attacks of the terrorists in Tel Aviv, the man who executed the act said that he did it because we killed his father in another terrorist attempt. So what I'm trying to show you, and they still treat women in Afghanistan, if they think that she shows up with a different dress, they burn them to death, and they stone them. So we are not dealing with past all the time when we are studying the Torah. It applies to what's happening today, every day. And the world is standing by, and there is nothing that we can do about it, because it's going to threaten our own sanity.
You frame it, I think, in what is a very stark, but, irrefutable way. We do live with it. And there are, Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, this Jewish philosopher who was a very Hellenized thinker, has that beautiful phrase, Ein chadash tachat hashemesh.
That's right.
There is nothing new under the sun.
That's
and I'm just thinking about it. All of our tradition from different time periods have had to address these issues. And here we are sitting, and we are dealing with it in our own society. And this may be the eternal nature of human suffering and human violence. It's the lens, when we open up the Chumash to study it, we carry a lot of preconceived notions with us, expecting to find, wisdom,
Solutions.
teaching, right?
Mhm.
And then you get into these stories like, wait a minute, what does this have to do with what I thought I was going to be encountering,
Mhm.
right? But we still have to. That's our commandment, to study it. Yes, Wayne.
Hi, my name's Elisa.
Hi, Elisa.
Hi, thank you for this. My
Sure.
first time. I'm a new member to.
Well, welcome.
Guard. So
Greetings.
thank you, and this is so riveting to me. Getting back to are you behavior is who you are, and you were asking for some kind of contemporary, understandings or explanations.
Right.
I think modern psychology has definitely come from the psychoanalysis of what my mother did to behavior modification, and
Yes.
basically 100,000 insights aren't worth one positive change in behavior.
That's right.
You
That is a powerful and illuminating statement, right?
Yeah. So,
And in a way, you could argue that that is what the Torah is saying.
mhm.
Right? There's a lot of psychiatry, right, that teaches this is about doing. You need to do these things. You can think yourself into the ground forever, but your brain will learn from your body.
Which is so interesting to me because, wanting to change bad habits or whatever, as a Jew, I get very Talmudic. It's like in my DNA, I'm supposed to think about it 4,000 million ways and directions, because that's what we're taught too.
Right.
That's anyway. And just one more comment about, the last, slavery. I mean, Judaism was started as a patriarchal religion, and women were chattel too. And we wouldn't think of women as chattel anymore, like we would think of slavery as okay.
No, it's true. And as you mentioned, or was mentioned, there are societies and nations on earth where nothing has changed in 2,000 years. Women are still
the property of men. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is this is a rich and challenging Torah portion to dig into, right? There's wisdom in there, and there's a lot of stuff to kind of wade your way through. I find it very compelling to my attorney friends, because this is law, and it gets very detailed, right? Well, if you do this, then what are you responsible for, and how do you repay, and who decides what the just payment is, right? So I find it fascinating. Just as an aside, we see, the origins of our liturgy are primarily found in the Torah, in terms of literally speaking, and also in terms of its inspiration, right? And we see the Torah in general as God's gift to the Jewish people, as well as specifically Mishpatim, Chukimu Mishpatim, right? Every night, every evening of the year, we recite a prayer, Ahavat Olam, right? God's love for the Jewish people is eternal. And how does God offer that love? Through the Torah. The Torah is God's gift to the Jewish people. And in that evening prayer, it goes beyond saying, Torah u'mitzvot, the Torah and its commandments. It adds chukim u'mishpatim. All of these rules that govern our society, right, are of equal importance to the Ten Commandments, right, the laws of morality, all of these things, right, that a society without rules will destroy itself, right? So it's just an interesting light shine upon the extensive power of the Torah within other areas of our tradition, right? And over time, the sages chose the teachings I think they felt were most important to be reminded of on a daily basis in our prayers. In fact, 3 times daily, right? Morning, afternoon, and evening. Although that particular one only occurs in the evening liturgy, right? And the conclusion of that prayer is, we praise God, the God who loves the people Israel, right? And all of this stuff we study, right, is part of that gift. This current French Jewish philosopher, I'm going to blank on his name right now, but he's written a number of books. We had him speak here a couple of years ago. And he argues, very, I think, forcefully that to be a Jew is to study the Torah.
Good.
Above all else, right? Because everything else comes from that, right? And it's hard to argue that, For liberal Jews, the teaching is, there are many ways to express your Jewishness.
That's right.
Right? And that is also true, right? His argument, though, is that it's got to be Torah-based. This is the sacred teaching of the Jewish people, and it's got to find its foundation there, right?
So,
yes.
So, Rabbi, you've given us a conundrum. I mean, either it's the active life which takes precedence, or it's the contemplative life that takes precedence. So we can either live, we have 2 options. We can either live in cognitive dissonance,
right,
and keep both of those in our head at the same time,
right,
or try to reconcile them. And I think the way that we can reconcile them is to say that they're both happening simultaneously. It's through the action and at the time that we're performing the action that the understanding is occurring. So
I think you've summarized that beautifully. I think that that is the challenge all the time. These 2 things are true and they coexist, and we're pulled in one and pulled in the other. And we're always trying to find, a balance in the blending. Even look, this great teacher, a Hasidic teacher, Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, right? It seems to me likely that he ended up living in isolation and probably lost his mind, right? The father, traditionally, is attributed of the mystical movement, right? Shimon Bar Yochai, spends 10 years living by himself in a cave, right? And they had to kind of rescue him and pull him out of there. So the solely contemplative life leads to isolation. And I can't imagine anywhere in Jewish teaching that that's what is recommended for a human being, that life is with people, with the community, right? And I think you hit it right on the nose. Right? Both are true, and our purpose is to live with both of them so that they nurture each other, right? And that's a high wire act sometimes, right? Right? But we're devoted to, maintaining the balance and living in that truth. You know, all of us live with pain and suffering and great joy and blessing. We all live with grief. We all live with, just incredible sense of goodness and beauty. And we hold all of those things together in our hands, right? Yes, Penina.
I want to add something that will make you all feel very good.
Okay, we like that.
Since the subject of women rights and stuff like that. In Israel, women are flying the most advanced airplane that you ever can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a woman that I know. Okay, this is
nice.
a young woman. And we're not going to give names and stuff because she's being guarded like a diamond in the wherever. And another thing is that the study of the Torah and the strategies of the people who led wars are being studied till today. 10 years ago, there was a rifle that was invented in Israel that was, you could see around the corner, not just straight with it. And it was called the Tavor. The Tavor is the name of the mountain that Deborah took her people to fight Sisera. So the strategy is being studied, and they don't discriminate whether a woman led it or not. and they even named this invention the Tavor, the name of the mountain that Deborah took.
It's wonderful.
Did a strategy against the chariots and stuff.
Thank you for that.
Antidote. It's really happening and really being done today. So women are okay there.
Yes, they certainly
and
are.
Here.
Benjamin, you had your hand up.
Oh, Cantor, thank you, and it's so nice to see you today.
Thank you.
And I just to again reflect on what Penina said: the women being recognized for their many accomplishments in Israel and the military. Here in the States, for the Super Bowl, which was just last weekend, the famous flyover by the big fancy American super jets was all piloted by women aviators.
Good.
So I think they're here. They're here to stay.
I saw it. Yeah.
There's no question about that.
And we simply need them in all aspects. Them,
right?
Us in all aspects.
Sure.
The other
Eric.
The other piece of news about Israeli achievements was about the extraordinary industry that has grown up in Israel for spying and intelligence gathering that's been sold to numerous countries around the world.
That's true.
Use in both against their people and against other people. Yep. So that's a leading Israeli industry now. Yeah. I mean, the extremely high, sophisticated, high-tech economy.
Okay.
Embedded.
No doubt, they're at the forefront of that. Yeah.
Sorry. I would like to add also something that has nothing to do with wars, thank God. It's that they have now so many desalination programs in Israel. A lot of them is being done now because they have a lot of space. You see green hills and you see the desert. We have already a city one there, but Beersheba, that was then when they brought the Falashis Jews. They made a home for a whole city for them. So they're trying to settle a lot of those areas that are barren, people do not live there, but the problem is water. So they need to find a way. So there is so many desalination projects doing now in there. So things are happening all the time.
No doubt. I'm gonna wrap things up by just reminding you that we have services tonight at 6:00. Of course, we'll be live streaming right into your homes, unless anybody wants to come. Rabbi Shapiro and I will be conducting the service tonight, and we're going to add a few special highlights, musical highlights. We lost one of our great synagogue composers this past week. His name was Ben Steinberg. Died at the age of 94, Canadian-born. and has been composing just beautiful, elegant, really important music for the last more than 50 years. And I did have the chance to study with him when I was in cantorial school at Hebrew Union College. We had him several times for, artist in residence, and what a beautiful man he was, the son of a cantor, just a gifted musician and composer. And so I'll be singing a few of his compositions within the context of tonight's service. So I hope you can join us. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all for being here to study today. I hope you
Shabbat Shalom.
We all learned something, right?
Shabbat
And
shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. A good sweet Shabbat to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.